this in regular polygon mode. So I'm going to make sure that short on that I have this a little bit to the character's right. So it's a little bit off, but we can still use this reference. And then if we want, we can actually completely translate on this. So character that's here, round off, going to select each D. You can see that now this adding detail. So a circular profile here that matches my character. And if you see it from the top here, you can see that now this looks less like a box and a little bit more like a cylinder. Now this isn't a lot of detail, but what we're doing is we're adding detail very slowly to build up the character. So I'm going to add some more detail from the front. So I'm going to go into the front view. And what we need to do is add some detail to get the vertical shape of the character, as well as add a little bit of detail so we have room for the eyes and the arms and all of the other parts of the character. So I'm going to do this by inserting edge loops. I'm going to do insert edge loop, and then I'm going to start with an edge loop right here at the top of the arms, another one at the bottom, and then I'm going to add one more because we've got a curvature here that we will need to model. And then on the top part of the character, I'm going to put one between the mouth and the eyes, another one towards the top of the eyes, again, just to block out the eyes, and then one more for the curvature here. So now with all of that in place, we can start to model. But before we model, we want to make sure that we're modeling to the smoothed version of the character. So when I do that, I need to hit the 3 key, which will enable smoothing, and this will show me the smooth version of this character. You see that my X-ray is kind of flickering on and off here. But now that I have this, you can see that, well, it's a little bit short on one side or the other. So I'm going to start modeling, and I want to model symmetrically because this character is left-right symmetrical. So I'm going to double-click on my Move tool and scroll down to Symmetry Settings and turn on World, and then turn that off. And now when I select vertices on the left side of the character, vertices on the right show up as well. So all I need to do is select those, and we're going to start moving those left and right. So again, I'm going to just go ahead and start positioning some of this detail to make the character. And you can see how very easily I'm getting the rough shape. And this is with just a very small amount of detail. So again, my X-ray is kind of flickering on and off, but I will persevere. And sometimes X-ray might not be as consistent as possible in Maya, so sometimes we have to persevere. And so now you can see here that I've got this character pretty much blocked out from the front, but again, from the side, it's not. Now, one of the things I'm finding is that the left view is a little bit better for modeling here because of the lighting in the scene. So I'm just going to hit my space bar, go into my hotbox, and let's just look at this from the left view. And then I'm going to turn on X-ray. And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to turn on vertex, and we're going to start modeling. Now, this time I don't need to do symmetrical modeling, so I'm going to double click on the Move tool and turn symmetry off. And now I'm going to just start again manipulating the shape of the character to match the outline. So something like that. And let's go towards the top here. And again, this is all very, very rough. We've got a lot more detail to add, but the closer we get at the beginning, the easier it will be when we add detail. Because if we're really off here, then all of the additional detail we add will also be off. So you want to make sure that you continue to keep the character in the proper shape as you move through the entire process. Kind of just blocking it out and then trying to pull it all together is really a little bit tougher to do from a modeling standpoint. So just keep things as tight and accurate as possible throughout the process, and that will make the entire process go that much better. So this is pretty close enough for me. And so now we've got our basic character. So you can see here, we've got, here, let's turn off the reference here. you can see that when the character is smoothed, we've got a pretty good detail. If I hit the 1 key on the keyboard, you can see how we've added our detail. And the 2 key will show you the cage along. Now that we have the body roughed out, let's go ahead and move on to the mouth. Now we're just going to create a basic mouth. We're not going to add a lot of detail, but we're just going to create the mouth and the mouth cavity. So let's start by selecting our object. Now if you want, we can see how it's smoothed, and that's working pretty good, but I'm actually going to do this in regular polygon mode. So I'm going to make sure I hit the 1 key on my keyboard, and we're going to go into the front view. So here is the mouth of the character. So I'm going to start off by creating some detail on these 2 faces. So I'm going to go into face mode, and I'm going to select this face and this face, and you can see which ones I have selected here. And then we're going to extrude that to create the additional detail. So I'm going to go into Edit Mesh, and we're going to go Extrude Faces. And then I'm going to scale this extrusion down. I'm not going to pull it in or out. I'm just going to scale it. Because what we want is we want this to be on the surface that we're working with. And you can see that right here, we're already getting a little bit of a problem here in that it's going in. As we scale it, it's starting to shrink down. But let's go ahead and take a look at this from the front view. And let's just get this about this shape, and I'm going to go ahead and move this up. So something about like this. We can always reshape this later, but I want to make sure I get it pretty close. Now the other thing is that we don't want this indent, because that's really going to make him look like he's got kind of puckered lips. We want this to be flat to the character. So I'm going to move this out so it's reasonably flat. And you can see here, when I do that, what it's doing is it's actually creating a little bit of extra detail here, but we'll take care of that in just a little bit. So you can see how when I pull it out, it's giving this convex. So we went kind of from concave to convex. But now that I have this pretty much in shape, I'm going to go ahead and add just a few divisions. I'm going to add 3 divisions just to give it enough detail so that it can animate, and then tweak it just a little bit more. And that should be it. So I'm going to go ahead and click off of this. So now I've got a lot of detail here, a lot of radial detail for the mouth. I added that additional detail to make animation a little bit easier. But one of the problems, like I showed you, is that this is kind of sticking out this way. So detail just a dent, because that's It's really going to make him look like he's got kind of puckered lips. We want this to be flat to create a convex. Can detail here a lot of, and then have this tweak it detail for the mouth. I added that additional detail to make animation a little bit easier. But one of the problems, like I showed, and I will also want to turn on this way. So we need to push all of this detail back. So I'm going to right click over this, go into vertex mode, and I will also want to turn on symmetry along the x-axis, so that way we can just move one side and have the other follow along. So I'm going to go ahead into this top view here, and you can see that I've along the x-axis, so that way we can just move one side and have the other follow along. So I'm going to go ahead into this top view here, and you can see that I've got these little rings of detail, and so when I select them here, they move in, and then just move those so that they're flat to the detail above and below them. So I'm going to go ahead and select these, and again, I'm just moving these along the z-axis. So I'm just kind of pushing them back. So I want to make sure that this is fairly flat so that when I start adding detail that I don't get additional bumps and wiggles in the surface of the character. So now that looks pretty good. So now that I have this, I've got basically an outline for a mouth, but let's go ahead and make the mouth cavity. I'm going to right click over this, go back into face mode, I'm going to select these interfaces, and I've got my symmetrical select on, so I'm going to go ahead and double click on that and turn symmetry off again because we don't need it. And then just make sure I have both of these selected. And then we're going to do another extrude. So I'm going to go into Edit Mesh, Extrude Faces, and this time I'm just going to go ahead and push that back. In fact, I can just hit the W key here. And the first thing I want is I want just a little bit of an inset. I don't want a whole lot of extrusion, because what I want is I want just enough detail to get the inside of the lip of the character. And then I'm going to do one more. And this time, this is going to be for the mouth cavity. You can see this a little bit better if we turn on X-ray. And I'm going to hide my reference. So you can see I've got this additional detail in here, and I can select it from the front. And so now I just want to make this into kind of just a generic mouth cavity. So I'm going to scale this flat, and then scale it up a little bit. I'm going to scale it vertically and a little bit horizontally, so that way the mouth cavity kind of goes in and has a little bit more of a cavity. And then I can do one more extrude. And then I can also scale that extrusion. So now I've got the basis of a mouth cavity. I don't really need the full detail here. Okay, and then now I just want to make this into kind of just a generic mouth cavity. So I'm going to scale this flat and then scale it up a little bit. I'm going to scale it vertically and a little bit horizontally, so that way the mouth cavity kind of goes in and has a little bit more of a cavity. And then I can do one more extrude. And then I can also scale that extrusion. So now I've got the basis of a mouth cavity. I don't really need the full detail here, but I've got at least the start of something. Let's go ahead and turn off X-ray. And you can see that now I've got a basic mouth cavity. And if I smooth that by hitting 3, you can see that I've got a pretty good mouth cavity. But you notice here we're getting a lot of bulging. And that's because we don't have a lot of detail around the mouth just yet. But we're going to go ahead and add more as we start to add the eyes and additional detail. So right now this is good to start. And so now that we have this basic mouth cavity, we can move on to other parts of the character. At this point, we have a basic mouth. Let's go ahead and create a basic eye. And we're going to do it pretty much in the same way that we did before. We're just going to extrude a face. But in this case, we're going to extrude just this one face. But this may create a bit of a topology issue. Now let me show you what I mean. I'm just going to go ahead and just extrude this very quickly. So I'm going to extrude this one face. I'm going to go ahead and scale it in, just to show you what I've got here. So when I extrude that and I go back into edge mode here, you'll see that if I do this eye right here, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edges coming into this one vertex. And that's going to create a really tough juncture to model. So I kind of want to avoid that. So I'm going to add in some additional detail so that way this will make the eye a little bit more flexible. So I'm actually going to undo my way out of this. And before we extrude the eye, I want to add a little bit of detail. So I'm going to do an insert edge loop, and I'm going to add an edge loop right about there. Just a really tight edge loop, about the same width as these mouth divisions here. And this will give me a little bit of space between the mouth and the eyes. And this will do a couple of things. One, it will separate the eyes and the mouth, so when you deform one, you're not affecting the other. And it also gives you a little bit of room in case you wanted to add a nose or some other facial details. So now that we have this in place, let's go ahead and go back into face mode, select this face, and extrude it. So I'm going to go ahead and extrude this face, and we're going to make it about the same size as the eye. In fact, we can probably go into our front view here